Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Film Frauds. You're myself, Matt, and my co-host, Tyler,
Hello.
provide completely unprofessional, 100% biased opinions on the movies of today, tomorrow, and yesteryear. But today we are continuing our Search for Modern Classic series. Last time we talked Decision to Leave, and today we are talking about Quentin Tarantino's most recent film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But Tyler, what is the Modern Classics series that we're doing?
So
What is our
we,
mantra?
what's our mantra? We essentially really like the idea of love watching movies, evidently, and we really like this idea of trying to figure out what are the movies that are either going to age the best or the movies that we think later down the line have the chance of being regarded as classics, because it's really easy to go back and watch the stuff that's regarded as classics because we can view it with a more contemporary lens, but trying to guess and figure out what may age well, what may remain in film discourse 30 years down the line is an invariably very interesting project. And we're here just to seek out movies that we love that came out. What are we doing? Post 2010, do you think?
Yeah, we're pretty rough with it. I would consider maybe doing some 2000s movies as well, but
Yeah.
mostly post 2010. I think
Okay.
is a good range.
Okay. So we'll do post 2010 in some special examples before.
Yeah.
We just find a movie we love that we think could age really, really well, something that could be regarded as a modern classic. And like you said, here we are talking about Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
I'm Rick Dalton. It's my pleasure, Mr. Schwartz.
Call me Marvin. Put it there. That's your son?
No, it's my stunt double, Cliff Booth.
What do you think about Quentin Tarantino? What's your relationship with him? What's your deal?
Yeah, so he's the first filmmaker where I realized a filmmaker had a distinct style. So I liked movies in elementary school, but it wasn't until eighth grade of middle school that I met two kids who were really big cinephiles, and I started to realize that good filmmakers had different artistic styles. And Tarantino was probably the first ever filmmaker who I was like, oh, this is a Tarantino film. My first ever exposure to him was this kid, Cam. He was my friend, not the Cam that you know, different Cam from middle school.
Okay.
He was I came home from his house in eighth grade. It was a Friday, and he's like, we gotta watch Reservoir Dogs. It's a sick movie. And so I'm like, okay, I'll watch Reservoir Dogs. And really right from the start, this movie feels different from any other movie that I've ever seen. From the opening conversation, to the hard cut to someone bleeding to death in a car. All that stuff kind of blew me away when I first saw it, and I became pretty obsessed with watching more of his movies. And then since then, Pulp Fiction is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love the Kill Bill movies. I would say, without going to spoilers, is my thought just yet on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I do appreciate Inglourious Bastards and Django, but when we go more into talking about him, I'll share more of my thoughts. But I think as a screenplay writer, he sort of starts to fall off in the late 2000s or 2010s. And then I would consider Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to be a return to form, screenwriting wise, to 90s Tarantino. And I'll explain more once we start talking about the movie. But he's one of my favorite filmmakers. I know he has a lot of people who don't like him, mainly because of his personality can be very divisive. And I think he's very incredibly talented, both behind the camera and as a writer. Not so much as an actor, but I do think he's one of the best filmmakers of our era, and I'm very sad that apparently he is only making one more movie. But Tyler, what are your thoughts on Tarantino?
So before I go into that, I got a couple questions. One, for our non-American listeners, how old were you in eighth grade, by the way? I'm trying to remember how old I was.
13? 14?
Yeah, 13.
12?
Yeah. So we're around that, kind of early teen era.
Yeah,
I'm trying to even
probably
think
13, I think, or 14. Yeah.
Did I watch? Okay, so and the second thing was, oh my God, I completely brain fart. Well, regardless, Tarantino's really interesting because I feel like you had a more conventional experience kind of coming with who he is. My first Tarantino experience, I actually didn't realize this until I was older. But when I was younger, this is the age of we grew up in an age where you had one family box TV,
Yes,
probably in a living room. It wasn't an age where you could have a phone or anything like that. So we had one box family TV in our living room, and it was a small, honestly, it's probably the size of a monitor I have here. It was tiny, but we used to have that TV, and back then cable used to just have reruns of movies, just old movies. You'd put on those kind of not FX. I don't know if FX was around then, but I remember a couple times late at night, my family would like fall asleep watching TV in our living room. And then eventually the TV gets let on because we had a big family. And I remember so vividly, like a lot of my fears, like weird fears, are stemming from me waking up and seeing something on that TV. Like I have a fear of spiders because I woke up one night and there was like a spider movie on. It scared the crap out of me. But when I was younger, I remember being really terrified of being like claustrophobic because I inadvertently saw parts of Kill Bill Volume 2 left on at night on the TV. I saw the eye pinch
Yeah.
when I was younger, the pinch and the eye
Yes.
squeeze. And I saw the 1-inch punch when the bride is buried alive. And that scared the shit out of me. It was terrifying. Like, and I never really like understood what it was. And when I went back, maybe during COVID, and watched Kill Bill Volume 2 and saw those scenes and was like, this isn't like, I had no idea. But I think probably like you, we grew up in a little bit of an interesting era where Tarantino has seemingly been adopted by like film bro discourse.
Yeah.
And it's the nature of it is he's arguably one of, if not the most popular kind of auteurist, like interesting directing style. His movies kind of like have this unique style and they branch into mass popularity, and his films have been picked apart and grabbed by film discourse. And we come at an interesting time, like a post Pulp Fiction era, a post kind of Inglourious Bastards era, where his movies have kind of been like talked about and dissected to death. And it's almost like a cliche to go like, is he one of our favorite directors? Probably. He's up there, definitely. And it's always weird to talk about it because he's also one of those directors that is very online, who we can hear a lot about. He has a movie podcast. Did you know that? Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's awesome. He's like arguably one of the most picked apart, maybe rightfully so, directors, but at the same time, he's arguably the most like in the public discourse, which I think is really interesting. I think it's no secret that I love his movies. I went back and rewatched a bunch for this. The only one I never really got a chance to go through was Jackie Brown, and that's still my blind spot. I know people really
I
love
haven't
that.
seen either.
Yeah, that's a bad blind spot. I own it on Blu-ray. I started it and just got busy with work, and I couldn't kind of get to it. But he's one of my favorite directors. I love almost all of his movies, even maybe some of the lesser ones. Kill Bill, like Volume 2 and like Death Proof are definitely lesser ones in my eyes. But I mean, his peaks are some of the best modern filmmaking we've seen. And again, not to spoil like you took here, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, we have like an interesting relationship with it. We saw it together pre-COVID in 2019. Have you seen it after that, or was the only time you saw it in that theater?
So this is my second time watching it, this rewatch for this video. Do you want to start talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Or just real quick, because I just even still, like, I've seen this movie 5 times now. I saw it once in theaters. I've seen it just like 4 or 5 times over the course of the year, over the course of since it came out. But it's a really weird movie and a really weird time because this was the last year pre-COVID. This is 2019.
Yes.
So
This summer of 2019.
yeah, we were entering our senior year of college.
Yes.
We went to see it at a theater, and then after the theater, I had to go to an intern job. I was a sports intern for one of our local news stations, and I was changing in the car as I was driving because the movie ran a little long than I was expecting, and we went and saw it. 2019. Do you remember much about 2019 before we talk about the movie?
It was the last year I was ever happy.
The last year ever happy? Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I was really curious about this because we can contextualize or try to figure out if this is a modern classic, but I think it's really interesting because this was the years we were like watching the Oscars. I didn't watch the Oscars the last couple of years. I watched the Will Smith slap, but that year.
I haven't watched Oscars, I think, since pre-COVID.
So probably 2019.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you, but like I just want to read the competition for movies that, because Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was nominated for Best Picture. It was an Oscar contender. It was regarded as one of the best movies of the year. These are the nominees for Best Picture. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, 1917, Marriage Story, Little Woman, Joker, Jojo Rabbit, The Irishman, Ford v Ferrari, and Parasite.
Okay.
That is a good year of movies.
Wait, so I don't like 1917. I thought
You're
it was
not
bad.
the biggest fan? Yep.
That was just like stupid. I thought it was well made, but I just thought it was narratively just completely. I just could not remember myself. I literally never wrote a Letterboxd review for. I saw it. I completely forgot to write. It's like one of like two movies I never wrote a review for. That and
Okay.
Extraction one I never wrote reviews for. Parasite obviously is a masterpiece. Love
Yeah.
that movie. I
Marriage
was like the
Story.
first person to ever review it. Marriage Story I rewatched a couple months ago actually. And when I first saw it, I'm like, this is like a perfect movie. And when I rewatched it, I thought it was really, really good.
Okay.
I didn't think it was quite as good.
Yeah.
Like when Adam Driver's screaming life, like when he's singing life at the end, like just belting it. I'm like, okay, Noah Baumbach, I got it. I don't need Adam Driver literally screaming life into my face. Um,
Little Woman.
I haven't seen Little Woman.
I've seen Little Woman. It's really good. Really, really
Jojo
great.
Rabbit is literally an abomination. It's literally one of the worst movies ever made.
I'm not as, I think that's an interesting thing we could talk about, but I don't think it's that great. I think it
You've
like
seen it?
misses. I've seen it. Yeah, I saw it in theaters.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen it twice through.
Oh.
It's fine. I don't think it's very good. I don't think it's like the worst thing I've ever seen.
I thought it was offense. I felt offended. Like I don't get offended from movies, but I was offended by how stupid the movie was.
Joker.
But most importantly, because it
Yeah.
wasn't nominated in 2019.
What
That
wasn't?
came out. Paddleton.
Paddleton wasn't nominated. That's right.
Yeah.
That's a good one. The Lighthouse wasn't nominated for Best
Yeah,
Picture,
Lighthouse
which
wasn't
is
nominated.
Film Discord. It was nominated for Best Cinematography.
Okay.
Joker, another one.
Yeah, I saw Joker. It was all right.
Yeah, it's fine. It's a fine movie. The Irishman.
I haven't rewatched it since I saw it in 2019, but I remember like the ending sticks being like the last shot of the movie. I thought was really great.
Yeah.
And then and then he hasn't made a movie since until Killers of the Flower Moon because that movie's
Yeah.
been in production hell for like 4 years or
It's
something.
just been waiting and waiting.
Yeah.
Then you have Ford v Ferrari, which I saw.
I forgot it as soon as I watched it.
Yeah, it's fine. It's like utterly fine. And then Parasite, which we talked about being a movie that will probably come up, I imagine, at one point
Yes.
on this search for the modern classics. So we don't have to spoil our talks there. It's kind of interesting that year because 2019 is regarded as like a very good movie year.
Yeah.
Do you think it is one of the best movies of 2019 from your memory? Do you remember how it kind of has served you?
So like I remember what was most interesting about the movie was because we didn't see it like opening weekend. We saw it a couple weekends after.
Yeah.
And so when I was talking with friends and my friends were like, it was all right. Like they didn't particularly like it. Like they much rather liked like Inglourious Basterds, Django, etc.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, what does this movie even like?
Mhm.
And then when I watched it, I'm like, this is just a throwback to 90s Tarantino. This is purely character driven. I remember like I think I liked the movie more than you when we first saw it.
I think it is only grown on me by every rewatch. I respect and love it even more. So that's probably true that I watched it the first time and went, sure. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have a pretty like different take on Tarantino. I think most people do. Like I would consider 90s Tarantino to be like the best overall, even though he says in interviews, like he says he's like the way like Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs are directed because it's a lot of tracking shots.
Yeah.
Whereas once you get to 2000s Tarantino, much more dynamic camera angles and stuff.
Yeah.
And I sort of feel like Django and Glorious Bastards specifically are like really great scenes, but like kind of like thrown together in like what is ultimately kind of a poor narrative. Between those.
We could have a long debate about these movies. I'll just say I disagree with both that take. I really love Django and Inglourious Basterds. Love them.
Okay, I would say the last 20 minutes of Django are like the only thing I would consider to be bad in Tarantino's catalog.
Okay.
But like again, like I rewatched Inglourious Basterds for this podcast. Like I love the movie, but I'm also watching. I'm like, does anybody care about their safety in this movie? Like, does anybody have any sort of sense of self-preservation?
Yeah.
It's especially towards the end, and like again, he's such a masterful with like working the camera and writing dialogue that like you don't question these things, but then like when you're watching like the climax of the movie, you're like, are there any guards seeing this? Like do people know they have bombs strapped to their ankles and if they don't care they're just going to keep shooting and have no sense of like maybe I should take this bomb off my leg? Like did they ever question that?
Yeah.
Like things like that I kind of go like like do they care at all? And I feel like they use violence, even though well-made violence, but violence is a way to wrap up character arcs in what is ultimately lazy fashion for me. Whereas in Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, although violence is used a lot, I feel like character arcs take precedence over just like let's all have all these interesting characters in a room and then they all kill each other. And that's pretty common in Inglourious Basterds and Django. And then to me, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is return to form from that because it's like he can't use violence anymore to just like, oh, what am I gonna do with this character? Well, he's gonna piss someone off and they get into a shootout and they both die. That's not really in this movie. It's more the characters of Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton are explored for 2.5 hours and they're so good. And I think this is for me is like represents a return to form Tarantino, like the great character writer and great screenwriter. Even though there are great characters in Inglourious Basterds and Django, I don't feel like they have very satisfying character arcs as they do in Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, or now Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, I think everything you're saying leads me to say that we should probably watch Jackie Brown, because that's the one thing Jackie Brown is. Jackie Brown is often, even just looking at like any base review, it's commended as his best character work, but also his most like human people. Because that's something that I think ultimately does get a little, I say probably like lost in the Tarantino style, is like the humanity of characters. Characters become like a forebear of style and suave and coolness. I mean, that's what Django.
They feel like toys to a certain extent.
I can understand that. I think I can agree with that, but maybe not as like negative as a connotation. I love his movies, but I can really kind of see where that's coming from.
I think it's negative because they make me care at the same time. Like I love these characters, so it's weird seeing like them just gonna be abruptly murdered. I'm okay with it like in small portions, but I feel like Django and Inglourious Basterds represent like that in its most gratuitous form. Is what I'm trying to say. It's like it's because he's such a good screenwriter. He makes his characters likable in one scene, and you want to see more of them, and then dead.
Yeah, and that's
like the point I'm trying to make.
Exactly, and that's ultimately why I think I gravitate naturally towards like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Is like I love character work. It's always going to probably be my favorite thing. If you had a well-written character in a movie, it's just infinitely better of a movie. And to me, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is his most realized characters, arguably his most realized world. And I think I even read it in your Letterboxd, but it's like I don't really care, like in the grand scheme of things, about like 60s to 70s like old Hollywood. Like it's interesting to me, but it's not necessarily something that I find nostalgia, reverence, or even like a love for, like Tarantino does, because he grew up. You read anything or listen to him, he's very
lived
very
in California.
clear.
He grew up in California, and
he knows exactly. The thing I really love and respect about Tarantino is like he wears his influences on his sleeve. There's no shame. He takes from the best and he makes it even better. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is exactly that. But before we could talk about the performances and stuff like that, but because we're talking about Tarantino, I want to harken back real quick to directing for the Oscars. And I want to ask you what you think. Bong Joon-ho wins for Parasite. We're probably not going to disagree with that. Yeah. The other nominations: Scorsese for The Irishman, Todd Phillips for Joker, 1917, Sam Mendes, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino. It's been a long time, I feel like, since like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and The Irishman are really good, like 2 and 3 options to lose.
Yes.
Do you think he has a case for winning this Best Director?
I would say if not for Parasite, then yes.
Then yeah.
He has a case regardless, but I think Parasite is a better directed movie. Considering it's all like mostly takes place in one house. I would say, and especially because it's like it's like a more tight, it's like a tighter script as well. I would say Parasite is still like a superior movie all around to me. But I would definitely say if not for Parasite, then I would have given the award to, if I was the Oscar man.
If you're Oscar man.
I would have given the award to Once Upon a Time.
Okay. Brad Pitt wins Best Supporting Actor for this.
So on this rewatch, he's absolutely phenomenal in this movie, and that's completely deserved.
Yeah. And Leonardo DiCaprio loses to Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like whatever. Yeah, that was one of those trains where you're just kind of like you're watching it happen. You're like, is this the best Leonardo DiCaprio movie?
About it. I'm strapped in. I literally can't do anything. He's really good at it. I shouldn't like. It's not his fault for the script.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the movie, we've already kind of like loosely talked about it, but if you don't know anything about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you're coming to this blind. This is essentially Quentin Tarantino, his love letter to 1960s, 1970s Hollywood. It follows the fictional star Rick Dalton and his stunt double Cliff Booth, as Rick Dalton is kind of like an old phasing out Western movie star.
Yes.
He's part of that like hyper macho, hyper masculine, like John Wayne kind of like era stars where they're in Westerns, they win fights, they do cool things, and they're just like masculine macho heroes. but we're kind of seeing the tail end of Rick Dalton's career a little bit. There's a scene early on in the movie where he meets with Al Pacino, who plays a Hollywood executive. He's, are you gonna go to you're gonna be in Italian pictures and win fucking fights? Like
Yeah.
he does that kind of thing.
And all his Italian movies are garbage.
Yeah. And we ultimately we follow those two characters as one, Rick Dalton comes to terms with him being a movie star. We follow Cliff Booth to be this kind of like gopher who helps out. And it's in the backdrop of the Manson family. The Manson family murders. We follow Sharon Tate, and it's this like it's this interesting like epoch of 1960s, 1970s Hollywood, a pre Sharon Tate Manson family murders, and we see that kind of like time frame. Matt, what'd you think of this movie? I know we've kind of briefly talked about it. What do you think?
I think this movie is amazing. I really, really loved it. You spend 2.5 hours with two of his most well-written characters, especially Brad Pitt adds so much like mystique to his character. It's really incredible how well built up he is. It's like you get an idea of who he is, but at the same time you really don't have any idea who he is.
Yeah.
Especially in the commentary, because I've seen some reviews talking about commentary around like stunt performers, what he represents, like the mistreatment of stunt performers, where he's doing everything for Rick Dalton, and at the end he was the one who takes all the punishment, and Rick Dalton is the one who gets to walk off in a happily ever after sort of way. And like obviously Pitt and DiCaprio going off each other is great. DiCaprio is great as well as Rick Dalton. Like the little stutter he has is great. His crisis of confidence was hilarious at times. Again, this is Tarantino probably at his funny, like where he's like writing scenes, not just like, you know, most of the scenes are written for a violent climax. A lot of the scenes here are written for like a comedic joke climax, like when he's talking with the little girl. And I remember when I saw this in theaters, I like howled when she said she was 8, and then 5 minutes later he was talking about how he's a has-been, and he goes, you'll find that out in 15 years. I was laughing so hard during that scene. And again, it's just such a good character study. It's like plot wise, I understand why people like the typical Tarantino fan would probably not like this one as much as a Tarantino movie, because there's less violence in it. But you just have to treat it differently, I think. Like you have to like when they're watching Bounty Law on the couch, and like some guy walks up, and like a guy enters the scene, and DiCaprio goes, "This guy's a fucking prick." Like that stuff is just building their camaraderie. You just have to go through. Tarantino's just doing a different kind of movie here. He's doing a buddy film, a love letter to the 60s, 70s Hollywood film. You just got to go with it, and if you accept it for what it is, it's a phenomenal movie.
I feel like the hard thing about like talking about this movie is one, has the Tarantino lens, so anything like hyper praise is always gonna be like it's the film bro discourse. But we're very much in an era right now, kind of like 2023, and I know this was 2019, kind of the like Marvel's was Endgame this year?
I think Endgame was 2019. Yeah.
Okay, so we're in like a Marvel Infinity War Endgame like year long, like holy shit, these are the biggest movies in the world. But the reason why this movie stands out is it's linear in an unconventional way, where the story progresses linearly, but large sections of the movies are dedicated to like shot for shot remaking old Western movies. There's a sequence in the movie where I recently watched this movie where Leonardo DiCaprio is like put into Steve McQueen's The Great Escape.
Yeah.
Like shot for shot, word for word, like everything. Like they recreate that. A large section, the movie's almost 3 hours long, 240 probably. Maybe 30 to 40 minutes of the movie is this section where Rick Dalton is playing a bad guy in a Western in this pilot. And you just kind of watch the pilot, and it only breaks when he messes up the character, and you get this great Leonardo DiCaprio thing, but then it comes back, and you're just like, it builds you so naturally into these scenes that no matter what, even if you're stepping back and you're like, oh, like what's the point of this? Like, we're just kind of it's clear that Tarantino loves this, and his like respect and his awe for this type of filmmaking brings you in, that even if you watch a 30-minute section of a Western that's part of a story, like a larger story that ultimately doesn't really matter, you're kind of just watching a day in the life of Rick Dalton work. It's the most riveting thing I've seen in a movie in a long time. And DiCaprio fucking kills it, like crushes it here. This section of like when he's acting as the bad guy to the breakout in this trailer. Spoilers, by the way. We're gonna spoil this movie. It came out in 2019. Deal with it. Sorry. Yeah, fuck you. From the breakout back to the villain where he throws the little girl on the ground and it's the cut, and all of that is just like some of the best thing I think he's ever done in screen. I love this. I adore this little section. What do you think? What's your thought on like the way that the story is structured?
That and the trailers for Bounty Law are like filmed like a 1960s like trailer would be filmed.
Yep.
And it's more than just their storyline. Also, like with Margot Robbie's storyline, as well. It's a lot of just like scenes of like, oh, look at all these Hollywood celebrities dancing with each other at the Playboy Mansion, and things like that. It's just meant to build this. It's all scenery dressing, but the movie is about the scenery, so that's why I think it works. And I do like the scenes a lot where they're just it feels like they're like Tarantino was like writing another Western, and then just like, well, I want to keep this scene that I wrote, but I don't have a movie around it, so let's just throw this into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then under the logic that it's part of another movie, and it works too, because like you can even see like in DiCaprio's performance, like when Rick Dalton's confident, he's killing it, but when he's not, like when he has a self doubt, like you can see in the performance of Rick Dalton that like he's gonna mess up soon or something like that, or he's not really feeling it. And also the politics around playing a villain in 1960s Hollywood, where it's like, where it's like Rick Dalton's getting older, so now he has to be the villain who gets killed by the up and coming younger star, which reminds me of like pro wrestling, where a trope in pro wrestling is like the older generation loses to the up and coming generation. And it's like that same logic, which is really fascinating. And he's like, oh, I'm a has-been now because I'm playing a villain. And that the politics in that were great. The politics around being a stuntman were great, and none of it's really like forced down your throat. It's just part of like their arcs as well. So all that I think was it served as like a history as well, which I thought was interesting.
No, I mean there's that great stuff where they're. I mean, this is Al Pacino. Al Pacino's in this movie for like 4 minutes. Kills it as like an old Al Pacino and leaves, and you're like, great.
Love all the shooting. Because the
14 Fists of McCluskey.
but DiCaprio thinks that's Schwartz. He goes, it's not Schwartz, it's Schwartz.
He goes, Schwartz, and he eats like a celery stick from his drink, and you're like, interesting. But I like when they're like, oh, you go into, what audiences see? They don't see Rick Dalton, they see Jack Cahill. Like they just see Jack Cahill losing a fight, and they bring it in. I think that you said it's just like you're watching these people just live their lives. I mean, that's ultimately what this movie is. It's just a slice of life, because the story ends and nothing ultimately, like, characters don't really change, if that makes sense. Things happen and stories progress, but you're only seeing like a little section of these people's lives. There's no like end point in their lives or change forever. There's like implications as to what happens at the end, but things happen, problems are solved, and life moves on. And that's it. We get this little section of these characters, and then that's it. And you just kind of have to wonder or hope what happens next. You talked about like Margot Robbie, you talked about Sharon Tate. You're exploring like these 1960s, 1970s Hollywood, but it is in the backdrop of like, this is the time when it was like the Manson family. This was the time when Sharon Tate and, oh my God, I'm going to sound like an asshole, but the other people in the house were murdered.
The other people who are recently murdered, but they're not famous, so who cares?
It's like
that's what you're saying, right?
It's like Jay Selbrig or something like that. Roman Polanski is a character because Roman Polanski was dating Sharon Tate, and we know who Roman Polanski is now, and it's an interesting kind of thing to see. And I mean,
let's eat breakfast outside in this front lawn.
I mean, if you had that house, I mean, I would too. Let's be honest, in LA. But you kind of like, it's Tarantino taking away the external fears and horrors of the like political aspects of the Manson family, of the time, of this like turmoil and conflict, and just loving Hollywood a little bit, which I mean, I'm okay with. I'm kind of a sucker for these types of movies, and to do it with such a unique visual and distinct style, it's my cup of tea. I love it. I love it a lot.
There's even things like, I was watching an interview with him, and he goes on like a rant for like 50 minutes about how people listen to radios in the car in the 1960s versus how they listen to them now. And like, you can just tell like it's a really like a niche thing to harp on, but like Tarantino has thought through so many aspects of 1960s, 1970s Hollywood, and like hearing him say like, oh, back then, like you wouldn't turn the radio down during commercials, you just talk louder than the commercials and things like that are all things that he considers when making his movies. And it really shows there. I think on a rewatch, my one issue with the movie was probably the Margot Robbie stuff, because I think watching it the first time, you assume that what happens to Sharon Tate in real life is going to happen to her in this movie. And it's like those scenes with her early on are meant to like build sympathy for her. And now, like on a rewatch, I would say knowing where her arc goes and knowing that it really has nothing to do with the actual narrative, I still enjoyed the scenes, but there was definitely like an emotional detachment then from like my first viewing.
I can understand where you're coming from, but I kind of think that's the point. Because the stuff that happened with Sharon Tate is she just kind of existed and then was brutally murdered with her, and she was pregnant at the time too. But that ultimately serves as like the rewriting of history, because we haven't talked yet about the oh my god, the Spawn family ranch scene, or the actual Manson family. By the way, played by Austin Butler, who's like Elvis and was a rising star, one of them. We haven't really talked about that. He is very good in it. At Tex. No, something dumber than that.
Yeah.
I'm
the devil. No, I was stupider than that.
Rex, Tex, kill him, Tex, and you poof, and then a bunch of different stuff. We're just gonna recreate that fight scene. We're a step away from the microphones and just
start screaming.
But I mean, bring
someone
it back
screams in the movie in that scene. I didn't just scream for no reason at all.
Yeah, Matt, something happened and Matt's vision just yelled. No, I mean that's the point of like the movie to me, is like it takes all the power. You live these lives, but the horrors of like external Hollywood reality just aren't present. Like Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski and Jay, they're in this like weird like throuple, but not really. Like if Roman Polanski messes up, she'll go right back to him. She was like one of those weird things. But it's ultimately like that's just people's lives, and Tarantino just puts a camera and just, instead of like the horrors of reality happening, the Manson family are a bunch of morons and buffoons, and they all get brutally murdered because that's what they deserve.
Do you want to talk about the ranch scene?
Is that the best scene in the movie? What's your favorite scene in this movie?
My favorite scene is like the failed attack on Rogue Dalton Cliff. It's like that's my favorite scene in the whole film. But I do love like when he goes to the ranch and he's like, what was Bruce Dern's character's name?
Something Spawn. It's Spawn Family Ranch or whatever.
It was originally supposed to be played by Burt Reynolds. Did you see that interview he did where he was like, Burt Reynolds was reading his script right before he died, so the last character he ever played was Spawn. Pretty interesting. And it's like it's weird because it's like Tarantino growing up again, because again you watch, if you're like a typical Tarantino dude bro, not saying that in a condescending term, just saying like if you're expecting it like normal Tarantino formula, you think like there's gonna be like someone's gonna get brutally murdered here, something bad's going on. It's like, they're taking advantage of him, but he's an old man who really has nothing going for him, so like, they do give him something in return. What that is, can't really say on a podcast, but they do, like, they're not completely selfish, and he kind of knows he's being played, but at the same time he's so old he doesn't really care.
He's like, they're nice to me, I watch TV, like they're fine, like
like watch TV with him and things like that. And because it's Tarantino, so it's kind of like a love letter to what happened in that genre. That's what happened during like the time period and the genre that he's attributing, basically. And it's a really, again, like set design wise, they made a whole set for the ranch, and all that's commendable, because like any other filmmaker, they would have just done a CGI background probably, but not Tarantino is going to put in the money where it matters. And I think it's a good subversion from what you normally expect from a Tarantino movie. I wonder if you feel the same.
I mean that scene at the Spawn Family Ranch basically just plays on typical Tarantino tropes, in my opinion, because at that point in the movie there hasn't been this like overrun of violence yet, as you have said is pretty typical in his movies. And Brad Pitt at that point is pretty established as like the secondary lead. He's not the main character, and we were long enough into a movie where nothing had happened. So, and he's also going into this cult, like very like dilapidated like horror area, and you're like, well, it's Brad Pitt, it's a Tarantino movie, and there's this constant tightening of tension. He first goes there and the people start coming, and he walks up and it's like, oh, is the Spawn guy alive, and you kind of keep wondering about that. And then all of a sudden he meets him. Oh, turns out he's alive, but he leaves and he has a knife in his tire. And then all of a sudden Tex is coming back on a horse and he fights the other guy and makes him change the tire. And the entire time you're like, what's going to happen? Like, is this the end? Like, are we about to see like the burgeoning of violence? And you're right, it's in this beautiful set. And then it just kind of drives off and the scene ends. And you're like, oh, wow, okay. You're like, they're like, interesting. Like, I love how he just kind of played with our expectations. It built tension perfectly. It's great because it also plays into his like rewriting history, where the Manson families are like these like gross, like weird, like dirty people who are like abusing and like live in like a shitville, and they're just like not like well adjusted, and it just kind of serves to push that final like taking the power out of the Manson family. They're not these
It's
scary.
also, I feel like it's also Tarantino's really first time like going into horror as well that I can think of.
Death Proof has a little bit of that.
But like
Death
when
Proof has a lot of
when they
that.
first introduced the Manson girls, like when they're like humming and they're walking along the street, like that was legitimately unnerving.
Yeah.
It has a really creepy because you know who they are, so it's a really creepy, like you know who the Manson family are, so that adds creepiness to it as well. And yeah, when they're on the ranch, like you get the like it's not just suspense like, oh, is someone gonna get shot? It's suspense like what are these weirdos gonna do? Kind of thing. So it's different kind of suspense, I would say.
Absolutely.
Because again, you like Cliff Booth a lot too, and like he shows no fear at all because he's Cliff Booth and he's the man.
Yeah. All the homies love Cliff Booth. He's the best.
Yes.
Have you read his novelization of the book?
No, but you have, right?
I have, yeah. And rewatching, reading the novel. I've read the novel through once, and then I lost the book somehow. I think I lost it in a move, and I bought a new copy of it because I really like it. It's very evident if you read the book that and rewatch the movie that Cliff Booth in the book. So in the movie, because we're skipping over scene after scene, there's still a lot of stuff that we found really interesting here. There's this potential that Cliff Booth murdered his wife. We see a scene of them arguing on a boat. Cliff Booth kind of sits down with a harpoon. The harpoon is very clearly angled at his wife. But then we cut forward and it's like, oh, it was an accident. And it's very heavily implied in the movie that he did it. In the book, it's pretty much like he killed his wife. And
what did they say? Do you remember?
It's not remember. It's more of just like, it's very kind of overtly stated that he killed his wife. But in the book, Cliff Booth is this far more violent, like sexual, if I remember correctly, like in a war, he will fucking kill you kind of person. Like it's very clear rewatching it, knowing that like Tarantino, from what I remember, like wrote out episodes of Bounty Law. He prepped these characters so intensely. Reading the book and then rewatching the movie, I'm not saying it like takes away from anything, but you definitely watch it going, there's never any danger. Like Cliff Booth is too like developed in like violent as a character that Tarantino is writing. There's no way he's getting harmed. But
so you say the mystique around Booth in the movie is better than what's in the book?
Yes. It's far more stated in the book who he is. In the movie, it's like, is this guy like, is he gonna like kill everybody? Like, could he? And he could. He lives in like in the movie, he lives in like this trailer behind an old like drive-in. And I think remember where he has like mac and cheese? I remember he has a line in the book that I remember very vividly, and he like makes the mac and cheese and he has a comment about like, oh, these fucking people add milk to it. But I figured if they could afford to add milk, they wouldn't be having this meal kind of thing. Like if you were rich enough to add the kind of one of those things, like little stuff that I think makes it a great companion piece. But in terms of like your thoughts on the movie, he's definitely, I think, better represented in the movie. There's extra scenes in the book. I think Quentin Tarantino is a character in the book, if I remember correctly. So yeah, there's
How's
that.
he as a writer, like as a novelist?
He's good. He just like you take his dialogue, it flows like perfect. But he also designed it to be like one of those mass market paperbacks, like a Western, and it just like I read like 250 pages one day. Like I just moved to California. I had no like anything. I had TV, I didn't have anything. So I just sat on my porch and just read like 250 pages of
Once
Upon a Time in Hollywood. We're skipping over a lot of stuff. Leonardo DiCaprio, I want to talk about a little bit more.
Hmm.
Phenomenal, right? I think we can
Yes,
all agree. Is
I would
this one
say
of
so.
his best performances you've seen?
Maybe the best,
Right.
honestly.
Like,
He's really,
honestly,
his character has so much complexity to it, and he's so funny as well. It's like he's funny, but he's also he never becomes like he's a cartoon character, but he's also so pathetic that you still feel bad for him at the same time.
yeah.
Like he's so pampered, and it's like, oh man, like he has to play a villain, but because he cares so much, you
Yeah.
care too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he contrasted the rig to Cliff Booth, who lives in a van. No,
Yep.
not a van. Whatever it's called. Um,
Trailer, whatever.
yeah, a trailer, and then Rick Dalton has all the is like the one who's always like on the verge of crying. He's all upset with his life, and yet he lives in a mansion on his
Yeah.
own street called Cielo Ave. And like because again, like I feel like it's more commentary from Tarantino. Like he knows how to play like this kind of character perfectly, and
Mhm.
so does Leonardo DiCaprio. Like yes, he's very unrelatable, but like at the core, like the feeling of insecurity or something that all of us feel. So they're able to really tap into that
Yeah,
pretty
absolutely.
well.
There's that we talked, you said your favorite scene of the movie was what? Was what again?
Oh, the attack on the house
The attack
and
on the
then
house at the end.
yeah.
I think that sequence of the first where he's filming the Western to, or it goes like conversation with the girl,
Yeah.
filming the Western, then you go from his like breakdown in the trailer to the end of that, I think is
Mhm.
my favorite sequence in maybe like any movie in recent memory.
Wow.
When Leonardo DiCaprio was like breaking down in his trailer, he's like, "Hey, ate fucking, you're so pathetic," and then
Yeah.
he opens the bottle, takes it, and like throws it.
I'm never drinking this again.
Then
And
the
then
next cut
and
is
the
just
next
him
scene.
drinking. He's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, what the fuck!" Like, I think that is like perfect because Leonardo DiCaprio. I recently watched Body of Lies. We're joking
Yeah.
around about that. Where you're like, "What is that movie?" And not to like change the conversation too much about it, but it's directed by Ridley Scott. It's a movie that came out like 2008. It's basically like a America Middle Eastern war kind of movie, and Ridley Scott, one of the greatest directors we've ever had. Leonardo DiCaprio, one of the best actors
One
ever
of the
had.
greatest and worst filmmakers.
Yeah, at times, Alien Covenant.
Yeah.
And the movie just is boring. Like there's nothing to it.
Uh,
But in that movie, it's Leonardo DiCaprio, and he has that magnetism about him that no matter what you're watching, even if the movie's not that good, you're like, I'm rooting for you. Like you're in that, and he perfectly, like you said, encapsulates that like self pity. But no matter what, he cares so much, like you said, that you inevitably you're just like, no, Rick Dalton, like crush this scene, like you
yeah.
can do it. Where he's like line, and the director's like, no, you got it. And he like
Yeah. Yeah.
freaks out, and you're like, fuck, he could have done it. It's just like it's my favorite DiCaprio performance. Like
Yeah.
I know he's probably better in other movies, but I think this is the one where I'm like, I just like I could watch him be this character forever, and I forget that it's Leonardo DiCaprio. I completely like I lose my sense of who he is, which is hard.
You want to talk about the final showdown?
Yeah. Well, before we talk about the final showdown, there's a couple of like little other things. What do you think of the Bruce Lee scene? Or
I think it's funny. I think people. I mean, it's from what I gather, it's a fairly accurate portrayal of Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
He didn't have a lot of respect for American stuntmen,
Yep.
and it's not like he gets like I forgot that it ends in a draw between him and Cliff. It's not like Cliff beats him 2-1 or anything. Um, I think like that Joey Diaz guy got angry and like that kind of stirred a lot of controversy. He's like that some idiot that goes on Joe Rogan's podcast who never
Okay.
even met Bruce Lee. He just got upset because he had this imagination of what Bruce Lee was like.
Okay.
So there's like I think it's a really overblown controversy. It's like who cares?
Okay.
I don't know. What do you think? I mean, the scene itself is great. The
Yeah.
controversy around it is completely unnecessary. And it's just like people just want to attack Tarantino for different things, and so like they'll find ways.
Yeah.
And like another thing that was stupid was like that girl who was like, oh, what do you think about Margot Robbie only having like one speaking line, like trying to label him as a misogynist, and they completely forget the fact that like there's a whole scene dedicated to that little girl. Like the little girl
Yeah.
has a lot of scenes, and there's a whole joke leading up to the fact that women in Hollywood get replaced when they're in their early 20s
Yeah.
because they're
Exactly.
too old. And Margaret Qualley,
Margaret Qualley. Yeah. Who's
yeah,
who's
she's
plays not Pussycat isn't her name, right?
Lena Dunham says like, "Oh, we love our pussy," and
Yeah.
so yeah, her name is Pussycat.
Okay. I just want to make sure. No, the whole controversy. I mean, Tarantino has been controversy, whether it's he puts himself in a role and says the N-word. Like he's
Yeah.
been a figure of
With an
controversy in
Australian
Hollywood.
accent.
Yeah, he's been the key. Yeah, that's right. Right about that, Django Unchained. He's been a center of controversy forever. I don't really like. I can understand why people get upset at what he does, and that's fine.
Yeah.
It's everybody's right. It's never really bothered me, but then again, I'm a white male, so kind of like I'm not really in like any target demographic that he upsets. So there's kind of that as well. I was more kind of curious. We kind of loosely talked about the Sharon Tate stuff, but there is an extended sequence in the movie before we kind of go to the ending where she goes and sees a movie with her in it and like gauges how the public reacts to her and like her as an actor. That is the real movie. That is really Sharon Tate. I kind of like Tarantino's respect for her as an actress, her as a person, where the movie spends like 5 minutes and you're just watching like a Sharon Tate role and watching Sharon Tate react to people. What'd you think of that? Because I know you're like, the stuff may not leak.
It was, I mean, it was good. I feel like when I first watched it, I interpreted a certain, like they're building more sympathy for her. But again, as I said, like now knowing what happens, it definitely felt a little extraneous for me, especially for a movie that's 2 hours and 45 minutes long.
Okay.
You're kind of like, let's go back to Rick and Rick and Cliff, because again, like we know she plays no role in I mean, she's in the ending of the movie, but like as an active agent, she plays no role in the movie. And I mean, it was good. Like again, it's more like dressing on the setting. So I liked it for that, for what it did there, and I think again, it's a good scene to build Sharon Tate's character. But like you kind of, I feel like at times I was like, okay, let's just get back to Rick and Cliff, because they're like their buddy, their romance basically is more endearing to me than this thing that's, because it's kind of like a gimmick in a way, because like Tarantino knows you're gonna think that she's gonna die at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
But then on a rewatch, like when there is no longer that risk, it's kind of like, okay, like why are we doing this?
No, absolutely. I want to play a quick game of true or false with you before we start to get to the end. True or false? Where she sees that movie is a real location in Los Angeles.
True.
Okay, true or false? That is a theater that is a couple of miles away from where I live.
True.
True or false? I have seen a movie at that exact theater that she was in.
True.
Okay. What movie do you think I saw at that theater? It stars Ryan Reynolds. It came out in 2022. I saw it alone because nobody would go with me.
Can't imagine why.
I told everybody, I was like, I'm going to go see this movie. And everybody went, I'm not seeing that with you. And I went, okay. And I went and paid a ticket and saw it myself.
A Ryan Reynolds movie came out in 2022, last year.
Yeah.
Is it the one with Will Ferrell where they're like Christmas?
No, that's maybe 2021 then.
I don't. Oh, is it the one with The Rock? No, that's on Netflix.
The Rock? No, that's Netflix.
How many movies does Ryan Reynolds make?
it's Free Guy. I saw Free Guy at that theater.
I completely forgot that movie existed.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool because like when you see Sharon Tate walk to that bookstore, that entire place is like they just either they just built a set or they completely redid the front of all that. It's actually by UCLA. They're two very popular theaters. But it's pretty cool to see Sharon Tate be like, "Can I get a ticket for that movie?" I'm like, I walked in and saw Free Guy there. And I was like, look how far cinema has come. Is it that great? And I get to watch Free Guy. I don't like Free Guy. The end sequence. You want to lay it out? What exactly is happening?
So this is basically the last night before Rick and Cliff go their separate ways. And so Rick Rick is drunk. He's already beyond drunk, and he just made himself some margarita coolers. His Italian wife, he did a tour in Italy, is in bed, and he's in his pool. And Cliff, who got a psychedelic cigarette,
acid laced
cigarette, from Margaret Qualley's character, like years before when they went to Italy, and he decides to smoke it then, and he gets high, and he takes his dog for a walk. Meanwhile, the Manson family members who murder Sharon Tate and the others inside Sharon Tate's house are on their way. But they park in Rick Dalton's car in Rick Dalton's parking lot for some reason.
Yeah.
And Rick Dalton hates hippies, so he
Yeah.
screams at them. And then the guys are being really nice to him, actually. Well, no,
Yeah.
another funny joke about the movie is that Rick hates hippies.
Yeah. Every time he
Which is
sees a
like,
hippie, he's like, those fucking hippies.
yeah, he hates
Fucking
hippies.
hippies.
And then Rick is just screaming at them. And so they're like, you know what, fuck this guy. We're gonna go murder him instead.
Yeah.
Little they know that Cliff is also in the house, and he's a army veteran and also like the most interesting man in the world. And then even Hawk and Uma Thurman's daughter leaves, which is a funny scene where she's like, I'm gonna go get my knife, and then but the guys are so stupid, they go, oh wait, here are my keys.
Yeah, he take the keys and it drives
door.
off, and they go, oh, and then they just.
It's weirdly how nice and polite they are, because like when Rick is yelling at them for like 5 minutes, they're like, sorry sir, we're gonna leave right now.
Yeah.
And then obviously they decide they're gonna kill him. But then like when Uma Thurman's daughter leaves, like they never assume that she's gonna betray them. So and they decide to go through it anyways, go through with the murder. And basically what assumes is one of the most gruesome and yet like hilarious massacre scenes I think in any movie ever.
Yeah.
Again, Brad Pitt's Cliff Booth has so much mystery around him in the movie that like he's good, but you don't know just how good he is, which I think is why knowing that he's like this murderer in real life kind of ruins it, because you know that he has skills, but you don't know like if he can take on like 3 people at once, especially while high. And it turns out he can.
Yeah, very easily.
going back to like Tarantino's persona, he doesn't like if you tell him not to do something, he's going to double down on it harder. Which is why in this movie, Cliff brutally murders a woman with his bare hands by bashing her head into a fireplace.
Yeah.
Literally in like one of those brutal things I've ever seen in my life. And the other woman gets mauled by his dog. Gets her eyes ripped out by the dog, basically, and is still for some reason determined to kill them, and falls into the pool where she gets set on fire by Rick's flamethrower. Which earlier on that set up as him having a flamethrower from one of his movies, and he goes, "Can this thing not be so hot?" And he goes,
he's like firing
Rick.
it. He's like, God, so can we make it less hot? And they're like, it's a flamethrower, Rick.
Yeah, the slow building tension where you know things are going to go down, but you just don't know what exactly is going to happen yet. And again, Brad Pitt's character where he's like, no, it's like Rex, he's like, I'm the devil. No, a lot stupider than that.
Yeah, a lot dumber than that. Nah. No, there's Brad Pitt is very funny as an actor. Like he do comedy very well, and he sells it completely. Like you're 100% right. It goes from like the movie's like it starts off, it's like this piece like they're gonna part their ways, they're friends. It's this nice like thing. Hardcore violence. Like he so in the book, the dog that he rescues from a fighting pit. Like that's the thing in the movie. So the dog like attacks Austin Butler's character Tex in the arm. He throws the can at the girl, and then she is screaming for the final 10 minutes of the movie. He then fights the other girl by killing her and bashing her head in. He then kicks Tex's skull in a quick. He kicks it in.
Yeah.
Then the other girl, gets mauled by the dog and then gets out and sets on fire. And then the end of the movie is just Rick Dalton going, those fucking hippies try to kill me. Yeah,
he gets to walk off. He gets to go party with Margot Robbie while Cliff gets carried off into a stretcher to go to the hospital. And even then, when he's being carried off, he's like, don't worry about me, Rick.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to go to the hospital tonight. He goes, no, you go have fun.
Yeah, go have fun. Go get your sleep. Go take care of your wife kind of thing. And she's like, she's asleep with your dog. And it's like, okay.
Yeah.
It's such a wonderful, because it even ends with like the camera going up and it's just like peaceful music, because it's like, history has been rewritten peacefully in a weird way. And it's just so fun. Like it's a hard thing to describe. You watch it and you're just like, fucking love this movie. You're like, this is a great movie. It's an excellent scene. It's an excellent movie. I don't have really like, I know you're like some stuff kind of drags. I think this is like a near flawless movie. Yeah, there's probably some superfluous stuff. Does it need to be 2 hours and 45 minutes? But at the end of the day, if Tarantino only makes 10 movies, I'm going to be happy. Yeah, I'm going to be happy about it. Do you have any final thoughts on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Pretty much covered what I want to talk about.
So now that brings us to the end. Matt, we have to have a conversation here. We did it with Decision to Leave. Is this a Film Fraud's modern classic? And I think there might actually be like a potential for it. What do you think? Is this a modern classic?
I would say yes, because from a screenwriting standpoint, I think this is probably one of the best screenplays of the 2010s. So I would say it was a modern classic.
Can it be a modern classic if it's not even the best movie of the year?
Well, I think because Parasite is such an exceptional movie,
Yeah.
we can make exceptions for it.
Okay.
Because like, well, I mean, it kind of depends what you consider to be the best movie of the year. Like, because it won an Oscar, does that make it the best movie of the year?
Well, I think,
Um,
yeah, that's a good point.
is The Artist the best movie of 2011? A movie that no one talks about anymore, but that won an Oscar.
But have we had such a universal example of everybody going Parasite? Like thumbs up, like you're the best. Like we all hand our crown to you kind of thing.
Yeah, Parasite had more like universal acclaim than Once
Yep.
Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I would also consider Parasite to be a better movie Once Upon
Okay.
a Time in Hollywood. But I think relative to like the goals that Tarantino was trying to accomplish with the movie, like I think he basically accomplished everything he wants to do.
Okay.
I think he does it, pretty expertly. And I know it doesn't have the violence that people expect from a Tarantino movie, which is why I think it has slightly more dubious reviews than like Inglourious Basterds or Django. But I just think from a character perspective, this movie, it's like really hard to beat. Especially with like his reservations to not really do any violent scenes until the very end. And I would consider it to be a modern classic because I think it nails character work and it nails setting. And it has like a fairly unique way of telling its story. And I think for the most part, 2 hours and 45 minutes really can't go by much faster.
Yeah. Okay. Final question, and then I will give my opinion. Can it be a modern classic if it is arguably not the best film of a director's oeuvre? Filmography, whatever
Um,
douchey word I just said.
I mean, if we're keeping it in the limits of 2010s and on, I don't think what the directors did prior to 2010s really matters.
Okay.
And I think it's better than The Hateful Eight. I
How
really
about
like
that?
The Hateful Eight as
Yeah.
well, but I think it's better than The Hateful Eight.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say like it. I wouldn't say like me liking Pulp Fiction more or Kill Bill more would affect that this movie as being a modern classic for its generation.
Absolutely. I would agree on everything. I think it's a bright light in recent memory of movies. It stands out to me as one of the most memorable. It's one of my favorite. I can't really, there's not much comparison recently. Like if I'm being completely honest, there are probably definitely better movies. And maybe over time, the more we do this actually turns out to be a weaker entry in our modern classics. And maybe we have like a retrospection down the line of should we keep including this? But right now, second episode, our first inductee, absolutely. Applause. Woo,
Congratulations, Tarantino. You finally did it.
You finally got the recognition you deserve. Real quick, should we reveal what we're doing for our next modern classic in like a month?
Yeah. So we're gonna be doing 2014's Birdman or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance.
Great title.
Mike Inarritu, who I don't think has been in a movie since Birdman.
He made a movie called Bardo.
Oh, he did The Revenant as well.
He did The Revenant. He did a movie called Bardo
I haven't seen Bardo.
It's on Netflix, I think. So I'm gonna have to watch it now. So it'll be fun. Okay, Matt. Do you have any final thoughts before we head out?
Next time we're doing another new series called Clearing Out Our Watch List.
Yeah.
In which we recommend together to watch 2 movies that have been on our watch list for far too long. We'll probably not say the names of the movies right now, unless you want to say the names of the movies.
Nah, because I don't even remember the names of yours. I just know mine.
Okay, I don't mind.
Okay, so we'll that'll be a surprise. That'll be a clearing out our watch list. That'll be for next episode. Okay,
Let
Matt.
us know what you think of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Don't forget to hit the Spotify like button or the YouTube like button or the comments and subscribe. Give us money.
Give us money, yeah. $100 each.
Yes.
All of 10 of you.
We sat here for an hour and a half recording.
Yeah.
The least you can do.
Yeah, the least
is throw us a buck.
Yeah.
On what? That doesn't exist.
That doesn't exist. Yeah. So just mail it to us. But we won't tell your addresses.
Yes.
You have to come and find it.
Yes.
I've already given you too much of where I live. So I live in LA. By that, like at least a 5-mile radius.
You pretty much could find Tyler now.
But do you want to know the best part is in that 3 to 5 mile radius, at least 100,000 people.
Oh wow. That's uncomfortable.
Yeah. So So, just keep that in mind. There's a lot of apartments you'll have to search through, and I might not even be here eventually. So who knows? Okay. All right, Matt, this has been fun, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.